Alright, so in this video, I'll be looking at Bitcoin and doing some analysis on it. I'll be taking a look at price action, and I'll also be going a little bit more in-depth with the market cipher analysis. I want to highlight some things that I talked about in my video yesterday, such as looking at general direction of market cipher, looking at multiple time frames, and looking at market cipher as a whole rather than just being focused on one particular time frame and one idea that you have off of that one time frame. So I've taken some notes on some things that I see across all the time frames. I'll be going through that, trying to keep it organized, but real quick, let's run through the price action stuff. So we just put in another high for Bitcoin. This is the highest it's been in quite a long time, like over a year. And, Bitcoin, since we got this very aggressive move to break structure, it has been more or less just ranging here, but it's more of like a channel, I guess you could say. We essentially are just SFPing the highs, getting retracements back to the lows, and kind of repeating that. So, we come up, SFP the high, get a retracement back down. Not really an SFP, but we barely put in a higher high, then get a move back down. And now we just come up to SFP the high again. We took out the high on Bybit. I'll actually take a look at Binance and see if the high is the same. So actually on Binance, we did not take out the high. That's interesting. I didn't notice that. So Binance's high is quite a bit higher than Bybit's. So that is something important to note. We have some liquidity on Binance above this high that we have not taken yet. On Bybit, we did take out the high, and we SFP'd it on the daily. We left just a wick above there. We closed the candle back down below the high that we SFP'd, but there has not been much bearish follow-through following that SFP yet. We've really only come back down to retest the value area high of this local range, and so far it seems to me like we're holding support on it. We got a pretty aggressive buy wick back up from it. We've kind of spent some time ranging here for a little bit. It's still possible that we do get a move down to break back into this range following that, and it would be at that point that I'd probably start feeling more bearish about this SFP of the Bybit high. But, now also the added context of the Binance high being somewhere right up here, I think it looks like we'll probably make another run for this high at some point. But again, if we start seeing other confirmations of, bearish follow through following the daily SFP, then there is a good chance that, hey, maybe the Bybit SFP is the one that works, and maybe we don't take out the Binance high just yet. We'll have to see. And you could note that it was technically a bullish break on the 4-hour, even though, we got this wick to begin with, and then we just barely closed above that wick. It was still technically a break. I would call it a break on the 4-hour, but it was an SFP on the daily, which kind of overrules that. And not only do we have the Binance high above us, but we also have this point of control of basically the bull market. It's like a massive value area that I pulled. And Binance's point of control is also right above us as well. They're a little different. This one's 38,800, and I think Bybit's is 38,700. Yeah, so they're a little different, but we do have reason to come higher, I believe. So now let's start getting into the market cipher stuff. So starting off on the weekly time frame, this is the time frame that I like to start from when I'm doing top-down analysis. Two things to note on the weekly. Since we have put in this higher high, we are continuing bullish weekly structure, and as we've put in this higher high, we have seen both money flow and momentum now put in higher highs. So we do not have any bearish divs on the weekly time frame right now. If I put a horizontal line right on top of this previous wave, you can see we just have gone above it, and money flow is clearly still putting in higher highs as well. Potentially looking like it's slowing down a little bit, but it's hard to tell on the weekly. At any point we could get like a massive pump on the lower time frames, and then this could tick up. So overall I'm just focused on the fact that we do not have any divergences as we've put in higher highs here. But it does look like this weekly momentum wave may be starting to top out. The white part is beginning to thin out and clip over on itself, showing that it could potentially print a red dot soon. But if we take a look at the VWAP and focus on how it is approaching the zero line, you can see it is starting to have an outward curve. It is curving outwards and away from itself rather than inwards into itself. And the outwards curve is a sign of weakness for this move to the downside. Shows that, this VWAP is reluctant to cross over the zero line. and could potentially be a sign of continuation. We've seen many times these sort of weak VWAP crosses, like you could even say right here, we kind of had that, but this was more or less a sharp angle and then it flattened out right in this area. This, I'd say here, is more of like a clear curvature that we're starting to see as it approaches the zero line. But, even this one, it did cross the zero line. We did get a red dot, but we eventually did get continuation from this. Momentum continued higher. Maybe the fact that the VWAP is showing weakness now and the fact that money flow is still putting in higher highs means we may get continuation from this, even if we do print a red dot. Maybe it does something like this, kind of like we saw over here. Now looking at the daily time frame, a few things to note here. The money flow, number one, has put in a higher high. It's continuing this uptrend, still looking pretty bullish. Really bullish, honestly, I have to say. I cannot remember a time where the money flow has looked this bullish and, has continued putting in higher highs for this long. It really, I guess was the bull market was the last time that we saw this. So daily time frame in terms of the money flow is looking really bullish. And going back to this last example, which was like the 2020 bull market, we saw a similar thing to what we're seeing here. Momentum putting in bearish divs, getting a drop down as money flow continues to put in higher highs. And eventually, momentum got to move down to the zero line, but it found support on there, and that is when we really took off. Now, am I expecting this right now? Do I think we're going to get like a bull market rally at this moment? Not really, but I think it is interesting that we're seeing a similar sort of look on the daily time frame here with the money flow continuing to truck on, put in higher highs, and momentum kind of putting in bearish divs. Now, I would say the bearish divs here, like what we're seeing now, is looking a bit more aggressive than the bearish divs that we saw back here. For the most part, these were like very slight bearish divs, except for this one down here. And then we kind of got like some more slight bearish divs compared to this wave. And then like as time went on, we started to see even more slight ones. And then eventually things really toppled over. But yeah, it seems like we're getting that momentum decrease a lot faster right now. The momentum is coming down a lot more aggressively. So, maybe that's a sign that we'll get a much deeper retracement once momentum actually, gets moved to the downside than what we saw back here. Really, we didn't even see a retracement. It was just kind of like little retracements. But momentum has locally put in a higher high, at least from this wave right here. We did print a red dot there, got a little retracement, and we have now put in a local higher high as money flow is putting in a higher high too. So, I'd be interested to see if this momentum wave can continue to the upside. I think if we get above this wave right here, it would be looking a lot better. But right now we do have the potential to kind of continue this bearish direction that we see. Nothing is really screaming like long-term bearish to me on the daily. Even with these large momentum divs, the fact that the money flow is still putting in higher highs and is not diverging from price, like every time price puts in a higher high, money flow does as well. That is a sign of strength to me that, even if we do see a large retracement eventually, that will probably put in a higher high on, the larger trend, which in this case would be the weekly. So now getting into some of the midterm time frames, the 4-hour time frame. First, looking at what's happening locally, we are seeing the VWAP start to curve back to the upside. Money flow, got to move up here and is starting a little retracement, but potentially we could see another push up if we see nice curvature on this VWAP continue. Could get another green dot right here and maybe get continuation from this wave. And really, I'm just kind of getting that assumption from the fact that right now the VWAP is starting to curve to the upside. We will look at the lower time frames to see if they back up this theory. But zooming out a little bit on the 4-hour, we can see that the general trend right now is that momentum and money flow are clearly diverging from price as it continues to put in higher highs here. We are seeing this direction to the downside. Starting from all the way back here, we started to see bearish divergences. The money flow started decreasing from this point and is continuing to put in lower highs at this point, but that could change here if we can get above, somewhere around this point, I'd say. I think this was like the last lower high before this wave, so, we could potentially be putting in another lower high in money flow right now. Or maybe we see this 4-hour trend break, and maybe we can actually see money flow and momentum get above this bearish trend of direction. Now, just because we do that doesn't mean we're, necessarily going to pump up. That could maybe lead to a little bit of a move to the upside, but we do see these kind of anomalies a lot. And, if from there we kind of see, this, where we see that momentum almost, immediately kind of curl back to the downside after you're getting an aggressive move up, and this just kind of ends up being an anomaly, and the overall direction continues with like the next wave in momentum and money flow kind of respecting this bearish direction. We do see these anomalies a lot. So just because we kind of break a bearish direction doesn't necessarily mean that the bearish direction is over. It could still continue later. So yeah, keep that in mind. We do see these anomalies a lot. So the trend right now is price continues to put in higher highs and higher lows as momentum and money flow are putting in lower highs and lower lows. So at some point, we probably will see price correct to what momentum and money flow are telling it. There's no guarantee of that, but that is the higher probability assumption, I'd say. But that doesn't mean that has to happen right now. We could continue this trend of putting in higher highs as momentum continues to put in lower highs, and eventually maybe we will see that play out. So now quickly going through the 3 hour to 1 hour, just kind of taking a look at how they look compared to what the 4 hour looks like. So the 3 hour did actually just get a green dot. So the VWAP on the 3 hour, let's take a look at how that crossed over. This is like not terrible. You're not seeing any curve at all. It's actually just like a straight line. So there's no inward or outward curve. It just kind of went straight up to the 0 line. And, let's take a look at the 4 hour again. So, we could kind of get that trend line as well. I would kind of hope that the next time the 4 hour updates, that it's more of an aggressive move to the upside, which would show a little bit of curvature. And that would, that would be a better VWAP cross than the 4 hour. But we do see the green dot on the 3 hour, and locally money flow on the 3 hour is putting in higher highs. So that is something. Now it is also putting in lower highs in the overall trend. So that is something to keep in mind, but we'll pay attention to how this develops here. Now let's go down to the 2 hour. So 2 hour money flow actually looks pretty bearish. This really doesn't have the local uptrend that 3 hour had. So yeah, the 2 hour money flow kind of coming out a little bit. We did just get a green dot, and this VWAP had decent curvature, but we'll have to see how the follow through looks. Right now it's kind of too early to tell, and it doesn't look great with the money flow coming out. But let's take a look at the 1 hour now. So yeah, okay, the 1 hour is starting to look a bit more bullish. Sometimes you will have like one time frame that looks really bearish. Especially when you're in situations like this where the price action is kind of strange. No one can really decide if they're bullish or bearish. They're bullish every time we're at the top of the range and bearish every time we're at the low end of the range, which is kind of the backwards way to do it, but that kind of seems to be how it is. So if there were a time to expect there to be like a random time frame that looks completely different from the other ones, it would probably be in this sort of situation. And this is why it's important to look at all time frames, because I would say in general it looks like we do have bullish potential on the 4 hour through the 1 hour, with the only one that kind of looks not so great being the 2 hour. The 1 hour right now is printing a trigger wave. Money flow did get a little retracement here, but now it's getting another move to the upside. So, who knows? Maybe the 2 hour is the one that ends up being right. Maybe this money flow crosses over and we absolutely dump. But, there's probably a better chance of the 1 hour, the 3 hour, and the 4 hour being right if things continue to play out how they look right now. So, yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. I like to average out what I'm seeing across multiple time frames, especially time frames that are pretty close together. Like I'd group the 4 hour through the 1 hour together. And then maybe like the 45-minute through the 15-minute together. Those are kind of like, lower to midterm time frames, where these are like higher midterm time frames. So now let's start to go down to some of the lower time frames. So taking a look at the 30-minute. The 30-minute is, looking more like the 2 hour actually. This looks a lot like the 2 hour money flow coming out. We just got momentum to move across the 0 line, but the 30-minute is actually starting to curl over, and with an inward curve on this VWAP showing that it's probably more likely to cross over the 0 line and print a red dot here. and the fact that the money flows coming out does not look great. But if we zoom out a little bit, we have seen, recently multiple times the money flow has basically held support on the zero line. It gets a very, very slight move into the red, immediately bounces back up into the green, and we did that again here. And this ultimately led to money flow putting in a higher high within like the local trend. So I would say it's possible that we see a similar thing again. But, again, we'll have to look at other time frames and see if that's possible based on what we see on them. So the 15-minute, when I was looking at it a little bit ago, we were putting in higher highs, and we still could be. Money flow is kind of locally putting in a lower low, at least compared to this little wave. But, you could say higher low. It looks like higher low and potentially higher low if it reverses right here. And, the reason I think that is important is because we did see something pretty similar back here, where we got a slight move into the red, put in a higher low, and then got a money flow reversal. So, I would assume this is the point where on the 30-minute we just barely got a dip into the red, and yes, I was right. So, potentially now as the 15-minute is doing something similar, and as the 30-minute is approaching the zero line just like it was back here, maybe this ends up giving us some support, and maybe we get another move to the upside. But, again, I'd say you have to consider the fact that money flow is definitely coming out on the 15-minute, maybe even more aggressively than it was back here. I mean, maybe aggressively is the wrong word, but it seems like a more clear direction here. You can put a trend line right here and drag it down, and pretty much, money flow respected it with all of these lower highs. Whereas in this case, it was kind of like, a barely putting in a lower high and then very aggressive move to the downside. So they are definitely different. So, I would say you have to probably consider the 30-minute and the 15-minute looking, bearish at this point. However, we have seen this provide support before. So we have to look at the lower time frames to see what we think is the more likely outcome. So let's go to the 5-minute. And the 5-minute time frame recently just had a nice shift in direction here. There is a nice money flow curve on the low end, and you see a nice shift in the direction of that. And, even momentum had a nice shift in general direction. We kind of had this deep wave here, but then it put in a higher high. So, you could say ultimately momentum is trending to the upside. And looking at it locally, it looks like money flow is getting another push to the upside. We may have put in a divergence. Yeah, we put in a slight divergence with momentum on that high, but it looks like maybe price is getting another push to the upside. Money flow is ticking up again. So, I'd say the 5-minute looks pretty bullish and maybe could give support to, that theory that we had about the 15 and the 30, potentially getting some sort of a bottom here. However, we'll have to see how this 30-minute VWAP plays out as well. If it continues, curling in with more aggression, then that 5-minute probably will eventually turn back over, even if we get a little move to the upside with money flow and momentum now. That's what I'd say. So now we kind of have a general idea of what market cipher looks like on all time frames. We know that the higher time frames, like the weekly and the daily, still look relatively bullish. Now the daily is showing signs that a retracement is likely at some point, and the 4-hour is backing that up with the money flow coming out as well as momentum. However, despite the bearishness on the 4-hour, price is continuing to put in higher highs, and I think there is still reason to continue putting in higher highs, at least for a little bit. We still have some significant levels above us, including the Binance high that we did not take yet. And we're starting to see the 4-hour turn around locally, potentially. And we're seeing the 3-hour and the 1-hour back that up. The 2-hour was not, but, overall, I'd say most of the, medium higher term time frames are showing potential for more upside right now. But we will have to see how the lower to medium term time frames play out, and we'll have to see if they will allow that or not. So, yeah, essentially at this point, I'm watching the lower time frames, and if I see a point where maybe the lower time frames line up with bullishness, maybe we do print a top here on this 30-minute, but eventually it starts to bottom out, and then we start seeing bullish developments on the lower time frames. if everything starts to line up, I'd say there's a pretty good shot that we will make another run for the highs. And that is how I like to do analysis with Market Cipher. I like to, get a general idea for how the higher time frames look, and then pretty much figure out what I want to see on the lower time frames in order to confirm my higher time frame ideas. Alright, well, this video is getting pretty long, and I think that's everything I wanted to go over. So, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and I will see you all in the next video.